Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another Thursday of Shaper Sessions. We have Philip with us today. Philip Morley, a fine furniture craftsman. He's going to talk a lot about his process with Origin and kind of how his shop has kind of changed since he got access to it, and a lot of things he's learn about his furniture building in general. Let's get started. We're just going to walk through some early examples of Philip's stuff, and maybe Philip, you can kind of talk about these pieces and let us know a
All
little bit
right.
more about them. So, all right, next slide. Okay, so this is Philip here on the right, and this is one of his big pieces on his website. I mean, that photo's pretty good. What were you thinking there, Philip?
So this piece I designed uh, and made for another gentleman. That's actually his business was restoring old vintage consoles. Uh, but the issue with that, a lot of those old vintage ones, they have a really cool aesthetic, but they were never built very well. They were mass produced. Now there were some of them that were built pretty well. And he basically said he wanted the quintessential mid-century modern record console, but built by a master craftsman. And so this is what I designed and came up with. It has the speakers. It's not an audiophile cabinet. A lot of people get into the woods with vibration stuff, but it's got some really cool features like the actual it was all Macintosh, so the amp and the turntable are totally isolated from the rest of the cabinet on these isolators. So I think they're made by Newport, and so you could bump the cabinet and stuff, and the needle would not move, jump around. So it's a pretty sweet piece. A lot of fun, a lot of little details in that piece.
That's awesome. So we're gonna go through a lot more of the pieces, but and maybe Philip, maybe you can kind of just give a introduction. I know a lot of people know who you are, but there's a few people who maybe
Yeah,
never heard of you.
absolutely. Never heard of me. Yeah, so my name is Philip Morley. I live in Wimberley, Texas. Originally from England, where I was formerly trained as a joiner. So a little bit different from what I do now, but it led me down that path. Got into the trade when I was 15 and went part time and then full time at 16 for 4 years. Did my journeymanship in London, and then I won't go too far into it because we'll be here way too long. But basically, came out to America and met a Texan and fell in love with her, and that's what brought me over here. And funny enough, it's when I got over here I actually got into furniture making. Um, I always knew I wanted to get finer with the craft, and it was somewhat eye opening. I would do come over at the summertime and basically work with graduates from Risley, Rhode Island School of Design, and they were doing studio furniture, and it was the first time I got to see like really like high end studio furniture, and I was pretty much hooked. And yeah, so been here for I just became a citizen a couple of years ago. Been here for 15, 16 years. Been married to my wife for 15 years. Got 4 kids, and I'm in my in my studio, which I built about 7 years ago, and it's right next to my house. So my wife, my wonderful wife, stays home, homeschools the kids, and I try to make a living doing what I do.
That's
And
awesome.
yeah, so yeah.
All right, well, cool. So let's jump into a couple of these pieces that you did kind of previous to getting Origin and kind of talk about a little bit of the idea that you're creating these in your own shop by yourself for the most part, and we're going to walk through a few of these examples.
Cool.
Okay, so next slide, got okay, so here's the first one. This is the Philip Morley chair, is that correct?
Lounge chair.
The lounge
Yep.
chair.
A Morley.
Okay,
Yeah, Morley
so tell me
lounge.
a little bit about this one.
So a lot of my work is I don't get to do a lot of spec work. I don't have a lot of time to do that. But each piece I do is it is my designs and my my work. So I've worked pretty hard to be selective to get the clients that I want. So I'm not being forced to do work I'm not proud of, or have to basically copy someone else's design. So this piece was a client reached out, and the same thing. Like my aesthetic is clean lines, clean grain selection, and mid-century modern. So to say this is some original design, no, it's been influenced by many others. That's how I think it works. It's not a copy of any one design that's already been done, but it's heavily influenced by mid-century modern. It's got that kind of madman look to it. And so the client came to me and basically said, I really like your style, like your look. Could you design me a lounge chair? And so this is what we came up with. And a little backup from that was, I don't get much time to actually just build a piece for fun, but I do try to continuously think about pieces I want to work on. And once I have some time, I do that. And that piece started out actually that way when backing up. It was a much simpler version. And the thought process with it was, at that time, I was like, I'm going to make a lounge chair and not put too much of me in it, meaning not go too crazy on the very subtle details. In that picture, you can't really see, but there's so many very, very subtle details that a lot of the clients don't even
Let's go
notice
back to
it
that one so
until
we can talk about a few of
years
them.
later.
So like you're talking
So
about the
yeah,
back.
so yeah, the bridle joint net, the very subtle edge treatment, that continues along throughout the whole piece. And I've had clients years later reach out to me and go, "Hey, I put my hand underneath the chair and felt this really nice profile. I didn't even realize it was there." And so that wasn't what it was meant to be. I was going to just do a very simple chair. And when that client reached out, I was like, I'm going to build on that simple form and make it a little more me. Basically meaning a lot of mass production companies are not going to put the time and effort into some of those very subtle details, just because they're not. That's not the market they're going after.
Right, right. No, it's a really cool chair. And I guess the question for me is when did it come to Morley lounge chair, and when was it just the chair you were working on for this guy?
It actually took, so nothing happens fast in my life. Um, I think I drew it out full size in the shop on some like butcher paper. I actually hung it up in my bedroom on the wall. And so it's like a front view, side view, because
Yep.
I still wasn't happy with it. So I like to do that so I can kind of walk by and not consciously, I'm not trying to think of it, but I walk by and I'll see something and then I'll just get my pencil and like mess with it on the wall. Try not to erase anything because sometimes I want to go back to that, but just try to kind of go in and do something. And so that actual drawing sat for 2 years
Oh wow.
on the wall. Um, and it may have sat for a year on the wall, then I folded it up, and kind of was comfortable with where it was, but just didn't get time to do it. So it probably took at least 2 years before I even made a prototype out of like poplar.
And so when you're making prototypes out of stuff like this, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, the process. So actually, funny enough, like this chair, I was going to say I don't draw chairs I in SketchUp, which isn't necessarily true. Typically, I don't draw chairs in SketchUp. I'll draw full size on butcher paper in the shop, working out all the angles and stuff, and then I'll go to a prototype. But this chair is something that a few schools reached out to me and said, "Would you be interested in teaching this?" And so I already had the chair built, and then I had to back up and draw it, 3D in SketchUp so that I could make, plans out of it, um, templates and all the rest of it so I could teach it. But the process usually is, chicken scratches. So really, I'm not an artist at all, but just little chicken scratches. to get more of the concept out. The proportions will be wrong, but in my head, I kind of know what it's going to look like. I don't spend too much more time there. Then
Mm-hmm.
I'll go and typically just take it nowadays, just take it straight into SketchUp. And I'm pretty comfortable with SketchUp where I actually draw 2D in it first. And so I'm almost doing it like I used to back in the day on vellum with my mechanical arm drafting table, which if you have kids, you know that's not going to happen. The kids will be ripping stuff off the drafting table. Um, but so I still treat it like a drafting program where it's just 2D. And
Yep.
then once I'm really happy with the proportions, then take it 3D, and then it comes out to the shop, and that's where I start making a prototype out of, 2x4s or poplar, especially chairs. I don't prototype everything, but chairs I have to.
Yep. Yep. All right. So the next one I want to talk about is the Philip Morley rocking chair. This is a
Yep.
beautiful one as well. And
All
maybe
right.
is
Thanks.
that this come before or after?
Um, that's before. Yeah, that's
Before.
that's that's actually the first chair that I've built. Um, and and as you can tell, I'm really good at naming my furniture.
Yeah, I was gonna say
Everything's
I'm getting a pattern here.
I hate name. I'm so bad. So typically, I actually don't know why I didn't name the lounge chair, but what I've tried to do in the past is name a piece after the client that commissioned it, so their surname. Unless they have a really bad surname, then I don't do that. And maybe that's the lounge chair issue. um, but that chair's kind of got an interesting um, kind of history to it. So it's 13 years old is when I first did it. And so it was with our first child. We were still living in Florida, and my wife wanted a rocking chair. A lot of rocking chairs out there are very big and heavy, and hard to move around. And my wife wanted a chair that she could move from the bedroom to the living room, wherever she wanted. With the baby in one hand, pick up the chair and move around. And there's the balance between strength. You don't make it too dainty where it's going to collapse. But a lot of times, I think people over engineer things um, to where the design suffers from it. So this is very delicate chair, but it's also incredibly strong. And so it's evolved. This is probably about the fifth edition of it, and every few years I change and tweak a little piece on it. But where probably the biggest evolved, like the overall design's the same, but some of the construction of it. I used to use like dominoes on it, and now I start using more traditional tenons. Um, I just changed the integrity of that, the stuff you don't see. And where that actually happened was my first time getting into CNC work. And so my apprenticeship, I did a 7-year apprenticeship with a master craftsman, Michael Kolker. He's here in Texas. And he saw the picture of the original chair, and that's kind of what got me the job. That and my vellum drawings back then when I used to do vellum drawings. And probably 3 years in, he said, "Let's make your," because he just got the CNC about 3 years in, and he said, "Let's make let's produce your chair on the CNC, not to make money. Like he doesn't use a CNC in where it would make any sense. Like he's making more money. He could do it faster probably without the CNC because he's what he does is unique, one of a kind things. So it doesn't
Mm.
make a lot of sense. But he's always chasing precision, and so we did it. We made it. The amount of fixtures and time that went into it is ridiculous. Back then, I think he was selling for $1,200, which was absurd. Like make no money on them. Now they retail for 6,000. But I no longer do them on the CNC, so it's back in my shop. It's what I'm doing right now. I have four of them. I'm counting, yeah, four of them right now that I'm building. So it's just a lot of jigs and fixtures, and I build them maybe every 3 years. It once I have an order of at least three, because it just takes a lot of hours in this chair.
Yep.
It didn't make sense for me to continue having him producing the parts on the CNC because I just don't push it that much. So it's a volume thing. So if it's every 3 years, I'm making four, maybe six of these. There's no, I couldn't afford to probably pay him what he needed to produce the parts.
Right, right. No, and there's some really cool parts of the chair. You know, the tapered tenons. Maybe that's something to pull out and talk about for a second.
Yeah, the I don't think you have a picture of it there, but one of the fun things was with this chair, and this changed where the arm meets the back leg. Um, back in the day, it would actually just dead end in there, and what I had was I created a round tenon on that end, and all of this is tapered and curved, so there's no one flat plane, but I created a round tenon that would go through the leg, and then I have the offcut because the back arm goes all the way through, right? It continues
Yep.
past the back leg, and then the offcut had the round mortise, and I would glue it on. Of course, that's kind of weak. If someone, definitely kids, they want to go on the back and ride that thing like a sleigh. Um, so he ended up, me and him basically discussed like, why wouldn't we do basically a half lap joint, right? Where you have your two pieces and they come across each other and you're removing the equal amount. It doesn't have to be equal, but you're removing amount where they will half lap over each other. The difficulty with that is the back leg it's fat and gets thin. So it's tapered and double curved, and the arm is tapered and double curved too going back. So you have those all having to intersect perfectly. And the trouble with it is you just got to pay attention. Sanding that part, you couple literally like 2-3 strokes too much with a sanding block. You couldn't do it by machine, but sanding block, and now it's loose. So it's a real sweet point getting them fitting just perfect, and then now you have that long grain to long grain glue connection there that makes that joint strong. So yeah, it's just a fun piece, and the crest rail. There's not a lot of meat where that meets the back legs, and so the joinery is all angled, and that's all traditional integral tenons because the slip tenon, there's just not enough depth for the slip tenon. And so I have nothing like whatever technique gets you the result you need. So in this case, that was the better technique. I actually think back in the day, the first one, I did some like fake tenons, and it's got a screw behind it.
Oh wow. That's a little different than your work now,
Samolov
huh?
style.
That's your
Yeah,
that was
yeah.
your old style versus your new style.
It's my old style. It's like high dose screws.
So one of the things we should talk
Nothing
about
wrong with
here.
screws in chairs, but it shouldn't just rely on the screw.
Totally. So, we talked a little bit about CNC and that one and how you were using it with the rocking chair. Talk a little bit about your perspective on hand tools versus using power tools versus using kind of CNC digital technology.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, anyone that does know me and the work I do knows I'm not some purist by any means, meaning using just hand tools and no electricity and all that. But if you are, have at it. Can you make a living doing that? Maybe, but it's going to be a lot harder. So it depends on like ultimately like what's your goal? Like what are you going to be a weekend warrior? Do it as a hobby? So all these things change the perspective of it, right? I'm trying to make a living, and so I will say personally, I think it is fantastic if you can get a training. So I did straight off 4 years at a community college that was a City and Guilds program. So being trained to be a joiner. The first year or two, it was all hand tools. So I was doing some pretty complex storm-proof windows and crazy stuff with all molding planes and hand planes and learn how to sharpen all that stuff. So that gave me a really good core to build upon. As soon as you learn those skills and how like planing a piece of wood and getting that feedback and knowing which direction to go and the wood, how the wood grain is going. It's all that stuff is really important to learn. So if you can learn that, the fundamentals, but from that point, it was then onto the machines. And a lot of the things you learned with the hand tools relate to the machines too. People have this conception of if you get a CNC, you're not a craftsman. The CNC does the work, which is, to me, when I heard that, it's just them not knowing or understanding what a CNC is. Um, my mentor was really good at it because he had 35 years, 40 years of traditional work. So he knew how to do the cuts and the feed rate and looking for the grain direction and figuring out how to jig it up and fixtures and all that kind of stuff. So that he just built upon it. And so in my shop, um, you know, I use hand tools where I have to, and sometimes there's no substitute. Like I have to use a hand plane, but I use machines too, and I think it's ultimately, to me, what's more important is the integrity of the work you're building and the design. Um, I get kind of frustrated when I hear people. I've even had people say it with the shaper, like, "Oh, there goes the craftsman. You're just letting a robot do it." And to me, this is a good actually example. I don't know if you guys can see this.
Yeah, yeah.
So this was a panel. This is basically just a template, but this was a panel that would then go onto a solid wood, and I would engrave this out, right? So this will all come hollow. It's just stepped down by about 1/8 of an inch. Um, to create this, I did it with trammels and routers and different jigs and stuff. And then after spending probably half a day, if not a day, probably half a day on this, it took 5, 10 minutes to do the actual piece. It went down, and then I had a router in my hand with a guide bush in and went. So to me, it's like, what's the difference between like doing that or have something like the shaper that can still, I'll probably still make the template and save me a ton of time and headache. Now, there's something I learned by doing it this other way, but again, it just really depends what you're trying to do. I'm at the point I'm looking for the tools that can do the job the best that I can, as speed, accuracy, safety, and I can produce beautiful furniture. So that's, each to their own. If you can get some traditional training, there's no substitute. There just isn't. But yeah, don't feel like you have to stay just using hand tools so you can post on Instagram and be cool.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right, so let's go back to a couple of these projects. We got a few more to run through because you've created quite a bit of furniture. So this is the one we talked about in the beginning.
Yep.
It's really cool. I mean, I think the
Well, and that, so on that piece, has a point. You can't really see it, but there's a marquetry on there to the white holly, and there's these tiny little birds, songbirds. So it says Tannenhaus, and then there's songbirds. So that was done by master craftsman Ramon Valdez, and the reason I hired him to do that, because that right there is where there is no substitute. You have to do that by hand to get that kind of level of precision. And what I'm getting at is when you look at some up close, the beak on that thing is like a millimeter or something. I mean, it's so fine. And he's doing it. It's basically double bevel marquetry, and so it's a technique that's been around for centuries. But there is no substitute. Like even if you lasered it, you still know you can see it's been lasered. You can't CNC it. You'll have the rounded ends, even if you use the tiniest CNC bit possible. So I wanted it to look crisp, right in the corners. So there's where it's like I could have CNC'd it. It wouldn't have given me the result I wanted. So I'm not going to learn a whole new skill set. I wanted to, but I can't do that. I can't do everything myself if I'm trying to run a business. So that's why I hired someone that knows how to do it much better than I do. So yeah, that was a really sweet piece by
kind of
Ramon.
the lone woodworker in your shop. I think that that's
Yep.
changing a little bit, but for how many
Yeah.
years, so 10 years of you being alone?
Yeah. So just actually in as Philip Morley Furniture, it's only been, I'm really bad with dates and time, maybe 6 years, 7 years, just as Philip Morley Furniture. Before that, then I was working with my mentor for 7 years. But all in all, it's been, 22 years.
Oh, wow. And then you were working on this one as well. I don't know the name of this one, but I'm gonna guess it's the Philip Morley
It's the Morley wall
curved
cabinet,
dresser.
curved wall cabinet. Um, yeah, I don't know if that one has. It probably is just called the Morley freaking wall cabinet. So I teach that one too. So I go around, country and teach that. So that one, that was kind of a fun piece, and the scale is probably really off. It's really not a big piece. It hangs on the wall, and I love wall cabinets. And so I had, which I think you have it there in the slides later. There's a commission that came through for a rifle, and they wanted a really, they said I want a beautiful, that piece case to display my rifle. And this one has probably the 10th one I've done. So I've built this piece and that other piece. Those are pieces I continue to build when they get ordered. But that piece was done first, and that one inspired the other piece that you showed before previously. And so it's actually the same sides. I just flipped them around. I was just messing around. I was like, you know what, this is kind of cool. And I just built that. That was somewhat of a spec piece. So I built it, kept it. It's in my house. And then I've sold several of them. I'm building another one right now in the shop for a client to display some of her artwork. I think she has like teapots. And then I'm doing an article for Fine Woodworking Magazine, which was meant to happen before COVID came and screwed everything up, which is, it's all good. We're safe and everything's okay. But yeah, so that's a fun piece.
Yeah, no, they both look really awesome.
Let me see if I can show you the side of it. Hang on a sec. Oh, I can't. Yeah, I've already glued on the edge, so I don't think you won't be able to see it. But this is the one that's being made now, and this is a
Yeah,
really
go to
fun
Philip's
technique
camera.
because yeah. So this is being banded right now. You can kind of see at the end. You can see like the edging that's gone on, and so this is a fun piece because it's called saw kerf bending. So you basically, before it gets tapered, you kerf it, and then it's tapered, and then it's bent on a form in a vacuum bag.
Mm.
And so it's a fun little technique. And so I teach that. I'll be teaching that in Indiana, I guess, next year.
You do a lot of teaching, huh?
Yeah. So um, anyone who's does studio furniture knows it doesn't make you the most money. um, you put a lot of time into pieces. It's kind of silly. It's like I don't do this because of the money. I'm not a romantic about my craft. Like I got into this because I was actually forced to get into. I was told I had to do this. I had a pretty troubled background, and basically the judge said you go to trade school or you go to community college. You go to trade school or you go to juvenile prison, and I took trade school and then found I was very passionate about it. It found that I was good at something. I'm dyslexic. I have a lot of learning difficulties, and this made sense to me. So that's kind of what happened. So I'm trying to make money at it. It's just it's tough. I'm doing fine. We have a good life, but teaching can definitely help, and it helps me become a better crafts person too.
Totally. You get to share this with a bunch of people.
Yeah, and there's no better way to learn and get really good at something by trying to tell 10, 12 students how and why. And
Right.
that's what makes you really good at it. It really does help. I do a lot of things and don't think about what I'm doing. But when you teach it, you have to explain it and why, all the whys and whatnot. But so I do teach kind of right now, again, coronavirus kind of screwed up some of the teaching gigs. But Mark Adams, Florida School of Furniture, and then the Austin School of Furniture and Design, which I'm one of the starting members of that school, helped start that school up, and here in Austin. So
Very cool. And we have a little bit more to talk about that later on, so we'll get to it. This is the last one that I wanted to go over, which is a table
yeah,
you
you
did a
made
while ago.
you helped make the template for that.
I did. This
For the
is
top,
where
I
we're kind
think.
of transitioning
Yeah,
from pre-origin fill to
yeah,
post-origin.
yeah. Post
So this
origin.
was the
Yeah.
first table
So
we
this
worked on.
it was. So this table, there's a bigger version of it, and it's one of those weird things where when you first start out your business, you get a lot of these phone calls. I want you to make me a table, and I saw one at Pottery Barn, and I want you to make it cheaper. Which, some people, I don't blame them. They just don't understand. Like, I couldn't even get the materials for that. And so this table, actually, it was a longer version of it. Started out with a lady saying, I want a table, but I want it painted. I want turned legs. And so I was like, yeah, this isn't for me. And then I just sent her this design. I was like, I can do this. It's a Scandinavian look. And she loved it. And then I convinced her, if we're going to do this, it'll cost you about 500 more to not paint and do it out of mahogany. This one's got a dyed base. And so it's really cool because I made two, one for me, one for my family, and then one for her. And actually, I made three at the same time and sold two, kept one. And then I did a breakfast table version for another client. And then the Wood Whisperer Guild. So I teach for them too. They have this as their project. That's the first project I've done with them is the Morley dining kitchen table. But you
Man,
guys
you're
helped with
good at
that.
naming. You're really good at naming.
I'm so good. It's ridiculous. So this piece, when I was getting ready to make that, that's just when I got the Origin. And the way you can't really see in that photograph, but it's called like a boat shaped top, so it kind of bows out,
Right. It's not
like a
a
kind of
square.
like a boat.
It's
Not
got
square.
curves
Yeah,
on all
it
the
bows
edges.
out. Oh yeah, all edges. And so typically the way I'll do that is I'll get a trammel and have my router out and figure out this absurd radius, or just lay out plots, marks, bend a stick, have my wife hold it, mark it, and then fare it in with a spoke shave and and then make the template from that template. And so this time I was like, you know what? Let me do this with the Origin. Like it doesn't make sense me going through all those steps if I have this Origin here. And so that's where that was first getting into that thing, right? People buy the Origin, but now it's like, how do you create the files? And so that was us discussing like, what's my options? This is the program I use. And you guys helped assist with that. Hey guys, sorry, my kids just came in. I'm on the phone. Can you close the door, please? One sec.
Okay, so while he's going over that, yeah, when he first got it, we started talking about how to get files across. And Philip had been using SketchUp a little bit before that, but it's really about getting the files from the design software to the tool and how to do that easily. All right, we're back. Okay.
Yo, hey, sorry.
Okay. No worries. It's live. Things happen.
Yeah, and this is why I wanted my shop next to my house so my kids could be around. So there you go.
You got your wish.
Yep.
Okay, so let's go back to the slide goose and show the next one, because I want to talk about the SketchUp a little bit.
Oh yeah.
Next slide. Oh, sorry. we got one more to go over before we get into SketchUp. This is a little jig Philip did, the Morley Mortiser. You want to talk about this one for a quick second?
Uniquely named. Well, yeah. So I mean, I don't know how long ago I built that, but basically I was looking for a quick, accurate way to do really more slip tenons. So this is a jig I came up with, and again, it's something I used to teach a lot too. It's a part of a class where, a lot of classes teach you how to build a piece of furniture, but a lot of times, the instructor shows up with the templates and the jigs. You don't really get to know how to get to the point to actually build the furniture because you've already been given the stuff to do it. And so this class was designed to be, we're going to build this, it was a really sweet little bench, hallway bench. You're going to make all the jigs, you're going to make all the templates, and you're going to make the jig to do all the mortising. And so it's actually a pretty complex jig. The top slides back and forth. It has stops, and it uses a guide bushing. So your router sits on top, uses a guide bushing, so it traps you in, and then you can actually ramp down and do really nice mortises. There's no one jig for everything. There's some pros and cons about it. One of the pros is you're on top of a piece of 3/4 inch, so you lose depth. But I use custom bits, so I can get pretty deep with it. And it was influenced by, I think Michael Fortune had one, which Michael Fortune's amazing. He's a freaking genius, amazing craftsman, jig maker. And he had one, but it was more designed for a particular router. You had to have that same brand. And so this was, when you teach, you got to think, I can't make this for my router because the students may not have my router. And so the universal guide bushing, that's where that came into play, and it works really well. And then this is probably the fifth, sixth iteration of it, and the match fit clamps was a game changer. To be able to clamp stuff vertically to that surface just works great.
Yep.
So yeah.
Cool. All right, and that one's available on your website for people who want that. Yep.
Yeah, I think I have the plans we used to sell the jig, but we kind of stopped doing the flat pack Morty mortiser. So we do have the plans. I sell several different plans on my website.
Yeah, and we'll post some links later on. Okay, next up. So we talked a little bit about SketchUp. So maybe let's go into this, because I think there's a lot of people out there using different softwares. What do I use? Maybe you can talk about your experience with SketchUp.
Yeah. So, SketchUp was, I first started using SketchUp about 15 years ago. And I use it probably not in the most conventional way. Like, I'm sure there's probably easier ways to do a lot of things I do in SketchUp. And it's kind of how I am as a woodworker too. It's like I just figure out how it works for me. So I've gotten pretty good at it. So I made that transition from drawing on vellum and stuff to SketchUp when I started working for my mentor. And I didn't like it at first. I got frustrated with it, but then I kind of stuck with it. And I like it because it's very easy to, like that chair. I drew that up, and again, 2D, so a side view. And then instead of erasing it, if something I didn't like, I just copied about 10 of them and just put it across. And so then I could go in, make different changes, compare them to each other, get in actual measurements. So for seat, there's real measurements there, like certain measurements works, other measurements don't. So I started adding those in. And then from that point, once I like it, I'll do the front, the side, really the top is the big one here. Then I'll save that as the all component or groups, and I'll just slide that off. Like, I'll find the one I like, slide it off, because that's what I'm going to use to make my templates. And then I'll go in with the other copy of it and go 3D, and probably spend more time than I need to. It's sometimes a little addictive. You try to go in, you do all the curves and the compound angles and the tenons, and I don't really need to do that. But the beautiful thing about SketchUp on more complicated pieces, like a buffet, where there's a lot of parts coming into play, you can really figure out every single part and how they interact with each other, and you kind of catch things that could potentially give you trouble later on. Because as a furniture maker, it's amazing how many steps you're already thinking ahead, and there's only so many you can be thinking at one time, and so inevitably you're going to miss something. Now, back in the day, you could draw that out, or you just do the detail picture. So a lot of times you wouldn't draw the whole thing necessarily, but you figure out like, okay, this detail, this intersection here, you'll draw that full scale, and it's the joinery. It's like, how does that joinery work? But in SketchUp, it's so easy to just get a full picture of what's happening. And then the other cool thing from that is you can then send that to your client. And a lot of clients have a hard time visualizing. So to be like, here's a drawing, a 2D sketch, or here's a 3D sketch, model. I can drop it in your house if you want, and we can get a feel for it. It's a pretty powerful tool. It's not the best 3D program out there. I stick with it because I'm good at it, and that's just what I'm used to using. Um, I would love to learn Fusion 360. It's a lot more precise, and it has a lot easier time with making files with the Origin. And so the way this works now, which with the Origin now, having it, is I basically like that display box you see there with the freaky skull in it. So that I draw that up, and again, even when it's 3D, I still have the 2D, so I can make the templates from that. Because when you start angling things in and doing all this crazy stuff, it's sometimes the plugin I have, I think it's called Face SVG. It
Yep.
can get glitchy. And so what I'll do is keep things just in the plane. So it's like, hey, I know where you are. And then I took that, sent it over to the Origin, and then I create, I don't know if you guys can see this. This is just MDF, quarter-inch MDF, and kind of mimic the whole, like everything. How's that piece going to look? And I can do that and get it right in front of my face, just leave it in my shop, walk around it, and get a feel for it. And from that, I went back in because I didn't like the proportions. Go back, make a couple of changes, send it over to the Origin, cut it out, put it back together, and then it's like, okay, that's how I like it. So I'm happy with the design, and now since I've already spent that time drawing it up, I have all these components, and so then it's okay, making jigs. How am I going to make these parts? And so I'll make the templates, individual templates, with the Origin, and then those templates will make the jigs. So kind of like, here's an example. This is very basic, but this is this little bench that I'm doing, which I think you have pictures of too. But so this is just one of the rails. So pretty simple, right? But cut it out with the Origin. And I could cut out the whole half-inch Baltic birch with the Origin, but it's going to take much longer. So just MDF, that's my template. That helps me pick out my parts on the lumber and stuff, and then use that to make like an actual jig, like this. And so Amanda did this today, and so she just took this, transferred it over to the jig, and now we're not double stick taping down every time because this is a semi-production piece. So that's kind of how the Origin is working. It kind of fits into my workflow. Use it as to prototype, to make templates, to make some jigs, and then I kind of use it sometimes to do some joinery too, which we'll get into a little bit. But yeah, that's from SketchUp. It just made so much sense to me. From SketchUp over to the Origin, it was pretty seamless.
Yeah, I remember those first files you sent us. We actually had quite a bit of time getting them out of SketchUp, and a lot of that was due to those, doing extra little operations on the 3D model. But if you just keep it real simple,
Yep.
2D, the export's super simple. Yep. There's actually one other exporter, Faber, for SketchUp.
Faber,
and that's for Origin. I had
a hard time with Faber, but I probably gave up, and the other one worked, so I just went with it. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I'm not an IT tech guy at all. So I mean, seriously, if I can figure out, and the thing was too, is you weren't just left with it. So, I don't get paid by Shaper to say any of this. But the thing that made it really work was, hey guys, I'm having a hard time getting these files. And what I thought was kind of cool, and to be honest, I was a little frustrated at the beginning. So it's like anything, it's a new tool. You got to give it a bit of time. And the thing is like Sean was very adamant on, don't worry about you creating those files right now. Send it to us. We will create the files, or help you through that, and you focus on actually learning how to use the machine. And that at the beginning, I was like, well, that's kind of, I don't want to do that. I want to be in control of all of it. But it made a lot of sense because instead of getting frustrated of not actually being able to get the files, I had the files, and then I could take my time learning how to use the machine. And then the Shaper guy, Sean, basically figured out, okay, what's the best way to export these files with using SketchUp, and that's where that face SVG worked. And for a free freaking program, it's pretty amazing. Mac can be real weird, like updating and stuff, because I guess it doesn't have. And again, I'm talking about stuff I don't know. Like if it's not licensed through the App Store, some weird thing happens. But it's pretty easy. I got through it, and it's really nice because you just like click it, create face, and then you send it over, and it's ready to go. It's been a few times it got glitchy, and I had to just redo it, but it's been pretty good.
Yeah, and sometimes you have to go into Illustrator or some other program and kind of
Yeah,
manipulate the files. But I think you're pretty
yep.
much doing this on your own now, right?
Yeah, I haven't had to mess with it in Illustrator at all. I think I've just learned, if you end up like that template, like the thing you've got on the screen there, um, keep it 2D on the whatever plane, on in SketchUp, and then transfer it, and it's going to be fine. If you end up bringing it in and angling it and skewing it, it just gets confused. Something
Yeah.
happens, and it will come out all kinds of crazy. But I haven't had that issue that much recently. So
Yeah. Well, and if you do have that issue, there's always Assist, Goose and
right,
Sam and others will be able to fix it. And
yeah.
I
Well,
think that's
that's
kind of
like I
the
said, that's
beautiful
what.
thing.
Yeah, that's what's kind of neat about it, is you're not just buying the machine, and it's like, okay, bye bye. It's, you guys have good tech support,
Yeah.
except for that
And
Sean guy. That guy's a little dodgy.
sometimes.
Oh, oh, hey, Sean.
All right. So we're gonna get into 3 projects that you built with Origin. I know we're running a little over, but we changed the rules a
All right,
couple weeks ago that we don't have to stop right on time. So we're gonna keep going. Philip's got a lot to say.
evidently.
All right. Is this the Morley display case?
All
We
right,
already showed it.
seriously, I'm taking this to all you people, all 5 of you that are listening right now. Come up with a name for it, and tell me. I literally sat down for probably 2 hours, me and my wife, trying to figure out a name. Asked friends, like something artsy, like honestly, if you can name your furniture, as much as I hate this, it sells better. It just does. Like if you can have a cool story, this piece of wood was salvaged from whatever. I hate all that kind of stuff. I'm not good at it. So yeah, this is the Morley display case.
Okay, so we're asking for some naming suggestions in the comments.
Some
We do have some
Yeah,
giveaways later, so
yep. Whoever comes up with the best name. So you know, this is a really fun piece, and the Origin, like I said, not only did I make the prototype, but what you don't see in this piece is all the track for the LED lights and everything that I had to do. And that's all buried in a very, very thin piece of wood, and plywood that's been then veneered. And so it's super crazy looking. I wish I had a picture of it.
go to the
So
next
I
slide. I think we
used the
have one
shaper.
actually.
Do we have one?
A little bit.
No, I don't
No?
think. Oh, you see it. I guess I can't see it, but yeah. Yeah, you see that, all those dividers? And so those are the drawers. So there's 4 drawers in the middle of that is for a drive, LED drive, and all those dividers. So it's like a groove, and then also at a 45 coming from the center, it was like this channel that was made with an inlay cap that was made so the wires could go in, and it was, I mean, thin, like 1/4 inch thin to get all that stuff in. So I used the shaper for that. Again, I made a template. And more I've used the shaper, it's more I'm starting to realize that I don't always have to go to the template. You just get a little nervous. You're like, if this goes wrong right now, I've just screwed up so much work, because on the other side of all of that is parquetry. That's,
Yep.
hours and hours of work. So it's like that bit, if I mess up the offset and go all the way through, I would be pretty mad. So it's just something you get more comfortable with as you go. But yeah, the Origin helped with several things on that. So this display case was done for a client, and I built 2 of them. I still own both of them. That's a whole story I won't get into. So I ended up deciding to auction it, to donate it to a raffle, to the at Kronoff raffle, for scholarship. So BIPOC students can get scholarships, make it more diverse at their school. So really cool, and I'm all about trying to help support people being able to do what I do. It can be expensive to go to a school for sure. But yeah, so that piece has like custom brass pulls, custom those LED. I forget what the technical name is, but the LED holder. Those were custom made too. They're really amazing. 4 little drawers that come out, like really sweet old hand cut dovetailed on those, and then the parquetry pair, and obviously the glass all the way around. So
Yeah,
just a
maybe if Goose
really
goes back to the
beautiful
last
display
slide.
case.
Yeah, you can see the
Yeah,
parquetry in the middle. How long does that take?
yep. So that one probably took probably about 8 hours.
Wow. And then you're cutting into that with Origin afterwards, right?
Afterwards, yeah. And that's why I made a template that used a guide bushing. And so everything was made bigger, that shape, and then the template located. But it was so cool because I could use the Origin to make that. I had these location pins. Everything was freaking perfect. And it should be. Like, it's always funny. It's like, oh my God, that worked. That was perfect. It's like, well, yeah, your drawing was perfect. Therefore, it's following your drawing. It's just a digital template. That's all it is. And so, yeah, so that it's still a little nerve-wracking, but it worked great.
That's awesome. Yeah, and maybe if you go forward to Goose. So this is kind of how you're cutting all
Yep.
the templates out.
Yep.
It's pretty easy
Yeah,
with
so those
Origin.
are,
Yeah.
yeah, those are like, so I made, again, like I'll make the templates. So just a piece of, 1/4 inch MDF, made the prototype, and then to make the actual parts, the picture on the right, where you can see like the little dog bone deal. So that's 3/4 inch thick material that I've pocketed out the actual rail so that it sat down and flush trimmed my parts. So, I didn't cut the angles with the Origin. I cut that on the saw because that's the better tool to do that.
Yep.
But then to cut the actual shape, I then dropped it in that jig I made with Origin and then went and did it. It was freaking awesome.
Yeah, no, I think that's something people don't always understand is that Origin's not just for cutting a thing out. Sometimes you're using it
Right.
to reuse a file to make a jig or all these other kind of
Yeah.
things.
And you can. I could have done every single part, honestly, with that. But, it wouldn't necessarily been the best tool. And if I'm making multiple of them, is it the best way to do it too?
Yeah, agreed. All right, next up we have another case. And this one is pretty
Yep.
Origin heavy, I believe.
Yeah, this is the so what? Yes, so I'm trying to think what I did. Okay, yeah, so that the small little case on top of the case. Um, so that has Kamiko, and it's actually bent. It's curved Kamiko, and I didn't make that with Origin, but I made the jigs to be able to create that. So that's actually a bent. It's a lamination of veneers. Basically, made my own plywood, but curved on a piece of like PVC in a vacuum bag to create these curves that then got cut up into little segments that would fit as the Kamiko pieces. And that the jig I made was made with the shape of Origin that gave me the exact angle and stuff. So it's super cool. Um, the rack, so what holds the this one was actually for this was for katanas. Yeah, it's not they weren't for guns. This was for katanas. So this guy reached out to me and was like, I have these katanas that are being made in Japan by this master sword maker that these are going to be his last ones. I think each katana was like $60,000 and he had four of them. And what ended up happening was I thought he said he had two. And so I designed this case. I was like, yeah, it'll work. You know, the rifle case will work. I'll just make it longer. And I sent him a picture of it after I cut out the rack with the Origin. I did all of it, like the tenons, everything with the Origin. And he sends me an email back and goes, hey, I don't think there's enough room in there. And then I realized I totally screwed up. So that piece on the top was my piece offering. Now, he was super nice. He's like, I'm super happy with this. It's beautiful. It's all good. I'm a little disappointed, but the craftsmanship's amazing. Thank you. So I just told him, I said, hey, what if I build you a really sweet little case that sits on top that will display one? And he was, over the moon about it. And it gave me an opportunity to use the Origin and make some cool stuff. So the joinery, the posts on that, I did with the Origin. And I wanted to do these tiny tenons. And again, it's all about using the right tool for the job. And I don't have another way to make tenons that small. And so I was like, shoot, I got the Origin and the workstation. I don't know if I had the workstation at that point. I don't think I did. It would have helped. And so here's one of those posts. So this is what's going on inside of that. I don't know if you can see that.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
So it's this tiny, I think they're like 3/16 by 5/8 little double tenons, right? For the maximum long grain to long grain for the glue. It's overkill for what this was, but it gave me a chance to see and use the Origin. And what was really impressive was I didn't know if any of it was going to work until I got it done. And so this was I think one of the first times I was like, I'm not making templates. I'm just going to take the Origin to the actual work piece, cut out my, located it from the edge, cut out my mortises on both. So, they had to be a mirror image of each other. And then cut out the tenons. Excuse me, sorry. And it all just came together perfectly. It was really cool.
Yeah, and I remember talking, one of the interesting kind of things about that was normally you can use the edges to locate the tenons, and you had already had a curved shape around. You're the master of curves, I would say. Never working on flat edges. But with Origin, you just set up the mortises in the file, cut the mortises and the outside at the same time, and you're not trying to figure out how to realign that after the fact.
Realign it. Yes. Yep. That's exactly it. Yep. And then I did too, like you don't see it on that picture, but behind it on the backside it says sliding doors. And so I did all the grooves also, and then to the little pulls for the sliding doors. It was really cool. I cut out, with the Origin, I cut out the circle, then I rabbited it, and then I made these like little rabbited circle pulls that dropped in, kind of very mid-century modern looking. That you put your finger in, had a recess, so you could just slide it over. But they bypassed each other, so it didn't hit. Nice. But yeah, it was super cool.
All right, and then so that's it for that one. We got one last project to go over, and this is your latest one. There's a lot to talk about here.
Yeah, why did I build this? So this was one of those things. You get an itch to just build something. I said I don't get to do spec work that often. And one of the curses with I know a lot of furniture makers very similar to me. At the beginning, you design a piece. It's like, okay, they're going for my design. This is perfect. And so you're building your stuff, but for some reason, because it's for someone, your mind is only thinking about the other thing that you want to build that's not for someone. It's a very strange thing. So this was we were going on a trip to teach. I restored an old Airstream Argosy, and the step that comes out just broke. And I was like, I'm going to make a stool, like a little stool that you could step up into the Argosy. And so this was I kind of call this like a almost a class in transitions, and that's what I love is how the individual parts interact with each other. And if you don't think things through well enough, that can really be a disaster. So this piece is a really basic piece, and but the way the parts interact with each other is what kind of made it into a nice piece. And that's that's the stuff I enjoy a lot. So this one I did go all out and use the shape Origin. So I made like a vacuum jig.
Yeah, so if we go to the
And
next slide,
again,
we'll show that.
yeah, it's like, what is that necessary? Probably not. I could have just made the templates and then guy brushing and all that kind of stuff. But I was like, you know what? Let's see how this works. And I just want to try out this vacuum. So you can see the red line going around the perimeter. So that's the vacuum channel. So the gasket, and then the vacuum comes through the middle, and then all those grooves is to allow that vacuum to get out and get as much pressure, get a surface to pull the part down. And the one you can see, there's a tenon sticking out, and that's to locate it. And so I take the blank, I put it down on the left side, suck it down. Nothing really has to line up that much. Suck it down, and then I take the Origin and I do the mortise on the bottom, and then I do the perimeter. I go about 1/4 inch deep. And originally there was going to be another design done, so that's why I needed like 2 sides to this. But then we ended up not doing it, and so I could have just done one side and been done. But there's going to be an inside and outside, so it wasn't going to be a mirror image type thing. It couldn't flip flopped it. So it then flips over, and that mortise goes into the tenon that's sticking out on that side, and that locates it. And then it vacuums down, and then I do the other 2 mortises. And I was going all the way through, but I basically stopped there. Did the other 2 mortises, it came off, bandsawed around the perimeter, and then flush trimmed it back to the Origin cut.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense and quite cool.
And so that was fun. I was probably pushing it a little bit because I think it's about 13 inches there.
Yep.
Or 12 inches. And I think the Origin, that started to get to that point where you needed some more tape there, and it worked. You just had to point that Origin just right. So yeah.
Cool. All right. So yeah, I think that one turned out really cool, and I think you prototyped that one pretty quickly. Sketchup straight to Origin, a couple tweaks here and there. I mean, that's one of the beauties, I think, is you don't have to worry about fixturing and cam and figuring out how to set up the CNC.
Yeah.
It's if you can design it in SketchUp.
Well, and the thing too is what made sense to me was, I watched my mentor go through the learning curve of a real format, big CNC. And when people say you click a button and go, it's like such bullshit, BS. True, that's what. It's such, baloney. I remember hearing, I'll be in the shop doing my thing, and I'll hear like smash, crash, and like the CNC went down to the table, destroyed like a $400 bit, it threw a piece off the table. It doesn't know where it is. It's stupid. You, as the operator, you're telling it everything. It doesn't know if it's cut. It doesn't even know what it's cutting. Like, it knows nothing. And so I saw his struggle with that, and I was like, I will never have a CNC. But then he mastered it. he does some crazy stuff. And again, he's not a production. If you go look, and here's the deal too. Like the thing that I struggle with is a lot of people with CNCs think they don't think outside the box. They think CNC, flat plywood.
Yeah.
That's all it can do. Um, and then those pieces they produce a lot of times you look at it and it's like, yeah, that was done by CNC because it looks CNC produced. Um, a lot of Scandinavian stuff done, like a lot of Heinz Wagner or whatever, how, I don't know how you say his name. A lot of his stuff is done on CNC. There's no way you can tell me it looks like it's done on the CNC because they've got like a fifth axle crazy CNC that's doing parts. If you look at my mentor's website, Michael Kolker, Colca, Kolker, um, a lot of his stuff on there is arts and crafts and it's done in CNC. It makes no financial sense at all because it's a one of a kind piece. It may cost about $30,000 and he's never building it again. He honestly could do it faster, but he's kind of probably tired of doing it the old way too. And he's wanting to, he enjoys it. It's the pursuit of that precision. So for me, I can't have a big CNC. Like my shop's too small. And unless I'm doing like production work, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for me. And so the shaper, I had my eyes on the shaper Origin for since you guys came out, and I was just watching and watching you guys to see where this was going to go, and it just made sense. It's like, okay, I have an idea. I already use SketchUp, send it over to the shop to this machine, take it out of the box, throw down a sheet, cut it, and it's like put it back in the box. I don't have to have this huge machine. But again, you're standing at that machine. It's not a production machine, but it saves me time in producing the design, the templates, and honestly, like some decorative stuff, like I plan to get into. There's so much options. There's so many options to how that works in my workflow.
Yeah. No, agreed. All right. Well, I think we're getting pretty close.
All
I did
right.
have one question, which is, let's talk about this premium project proposal. It's called the coffee
Oh
rack.
yeah.
I think the title's wrong. The Morley coffee
I think it's
rack.
for.
We might have to
No, it's
change that.
weed. Weed. It's
Oh, it
for weed.
is.
Yeah.
Or
That's probably why it's
tea,
not doing very well.
or anything you want.
Yeah, that kind. What kind of tea? Yeah, it's
Well,
whatever
give us your
rack.
pitch on this one. If people don't know, this is a project they can vote on. The premium
Yeah.
projects will get
So
created from the ones people want, and this is Phillips on Shaper Hub.
is there a picture of the top of that?
Oh,
I don't think it shows the top of it. So there was two versions. There was one that had dovetails, but I think the one we're doing for the premium project, I redesigned it. I actually taught it as a class, an online class, and so it's just a really fun project. It's meant to be something that's artful in itself to hang up on the wall. Like, okay, is it the most practical thing? How much tea can it hold? Actually, it can hold quite a bit. But I end up using it as a coffee thing, and then the brass rod that comes out is to hold this custom, little wooden spoon a friend made for me that I use as my coffee as a coffee scoop. And the cool thing with it is, it's a great project for the Origin because you can do all of it. So you get to, you're going to profile the perimeter with it. You're going to cut out your mortises with it. Then you can cut out your tenons. If you've got the workstation, or figure out how to jig up to do that. Cut out all the tenons too. It will cut the holes for the brass rods. There's a lot in that very simple design. And it's the thing, and not to insult anyone at all, but again, with CNCs, a lot of times things just look like they're done on CNCs. And so a lot of projects, it's not fine furniture necessarily. And again, whatever works for you, I'm not dogging anyone for that. But for me, I wanted to use it in a way where, okay, this is a simple T-rack, but it is a fine piece of furniture. It's still got some ground in tradition with the mortise and tenons. The design's nice. It's all solid wood. It's not a plywood kind of knocked together thing. And so I just thought when you guys reached out, if there was a good project, that just seemed like it would be a great project for someone getting into the Shaper Origin and end up with something that's a beautiful piece that will go in any any home and look really nice. So yeah, go vote on it, please.
He's asking people.
Now,
We'll put the link in the chat so you can check it out. One
yep.
question I had, did you what did you think the Origin was going to bring you before you got it versus now when you've had all this time? And maybe for people who haven't gotten Origin yet, maybe what's the thought there?
Um, well, like the idea of what I thought it was going to bring. I mean, those two things are probably very similar. Because what I saw in the Origin was the versatility of having a small format CNC that I could use a lot for. And I guess I actually answered that question. It was more just templates. I looked at it
Yeah.
as I'm not going to cut out 10 parts of something with this. That's not the fastest way to do it. But to make precise templates, like heck yeah, that's awesome. And to make like matching templates, like male and female templates that nestle perfectly together. And that's kind of what I saw it as. What it's probably grown more into is the smaller little things that it can do, especially with the workstation. So pulls or little like that gun rack, the whole holder for that. Some really oddball tenons, and then decorative stuff too. This is what I want to get into more. I actually took my other one inside, but like this is some inlay in brass. So it's Coca-Cola, 3 dots that I inlaid in brass. So I actually cut the inlay to Coca-Cola and mortised this. And it's kind of eye-opening. It's like, oh, that's pretty freaking cool. Because in another life, I would have been a machinist. Like I love working with brass and metals and trying to incorporate that into furniture. So I see the Origin as something where it will give me the flexibility to keep pushing myself in the craft and using different materials and kind of just making kind of cool patterns. I don't know, you probably can't see that at all.
Yeah, we can see it. Oh.
You know, but yeah, it's definitely something. Do I use it every day all the time? No. Where it gets used the most is probably right at the beginning of a project. And then probably midway somewhere if I'm, like, hey, it'd be cool to add, a certain element. How can I do that? Okay, I could do it how I traditionally did it, or wait, I have this guy right here. Within like 20 minutes, I'm ready to go. So it's pretty versatile.
No, it's awesome. I think the workstation actually changes quite a bit. I know you had Origin a long time before Workstation, maybe.
Yes. Yeah, I've made all kinds of ghetto workstations.
So yeah, so if you haven't checked that out, go check it out on the website. We have a bunch of info about the workstation. But yeah, it's kind of a game
That's really
changer.
nice.
I want to say thanks for joining, Philip. This was awesome. I think people really enjoyed talking with you. So we'll see you next time, next week on Shaper Session.
All right. Thanks, guys.